So, folks, I woke up this morning, and one of the things I do when I wake up in the morning is I check the unfortunate hellscape Twitter machine. I like to see what's happening in the world. And an artist named Ari Lennox was trending this morning on the Twitter machine. And I admittedly do not know much about Ari Lennox. I know that she's an R&B artist. I learned today that she was signed to Dreamville. I did not know that. Typically, I have been sort of shielded from mainstream music. I think the more that I get into these industry and artist conversations that we're having here on the morning show, I've begun to pay attention a little more. I learned that Ari Lennox was trending today because Ari Lennox had put on her social media that she wanted to be out of her label deal with Dreamville and Interscope Records. And she put an 18-minute long rant, vent on her Instagram, sort of laying out what her issues were on the label. It mostly seems centered around Ari Lennox, who has been associated with mental health struggles in the past because she's been honest about her challenges in a way that we're not necessarily used to hearing from artists. I do know that much about her, even though I don't know much about her actual music. But it turns out that's part of the problem. She had released some video recently, or shot and filmed and produced some video recently that the intent of it seemed to be to further associate her with mental health. But she had decided at some point after producing this piece of video and living her life and sort of noticing that everyone that she meets, everyone around her constantly associates her with struggles with mental health. And she sort of had this realization that she didn't want to feed into that anymore. So she told her label, Dreamville, and the parent label, Interscope, that she didn't want this video out, and they put it out anyway. And she told them that she wanted it taken down. And they gave her some excuse about not being in control of who puts it up, which is some complete bullshit. Complete bullshit. But she felt very disrespected and unprotected and unsupported about them not listening to her wishes when it came to that. And she also, in this rant, talked about how she dropped a single recently that everybody in the label seemed to be very excited about, but they didn't or wouldn't support. They wouldn't spend any money on marketing. She said that she asked them about digital ads, and she was told that they don't believe in digital ads. And she described this really like I felt this when she said this. She told this story of, okay, everybody at the label's all hyped up about this song, but the song she's worked on, she's very excited about. Everybody at the label's excited about it. She puts it out on a Friday, which is another issue we've seen a lot of discussion about recently because Tyler chose to put his album out on a Monday, and we're able to see like how much better that is for all of the work that's put into the music, all of the work that's being put into getting the word out about it. It's way better if it can be released earlier in the week where people still have time to discuss it. She put this single out on a Friday. The label didn't put any money behind pushing it. And so it just came and went. And she described this moment of like, it's out, it's a Friday. All the staff has left the office. And she's just at home in a panic trying to figure out how to set up Google ads and like Instagram ads for her own single. And that hit me because I've been in that situation. Now, being independent, I more have the expectation that there's different hats I'm going to have to wear. But it touched this nerve of we spend our whole lives or whatever portion of our adulthood we spend trying to devote ourselves to these crafts, and you don't know until you get in these positions that, like, okay, you have to be somewhat masterful in this music, but you have to potentially also learn how marketing works. And like I said, for me as an independent artist, I come from more of a DIY background where you expect to have to do these things. But I can imagine for someone who you're signed by a huge label, like Interscope is one of the biggest labels around that have made stars for decades. And you think this is the goal. You think I've signed this paper. I don't know what her deal was. 6, 7 album deal with Interscope. They probably gave her who knows how much money up front and in advance. You enter this machine and you think that this is it. This is what's going to make you a star. This is what's going to make your career pop. And you don't know till you get there what priority you're going to be to the label. And when you are a high priority for the label, you get the support of everyone in the building. It feels like everybody is linking together in alignment, and it's all hands on deck, and they're pushing your product. But that's not the reality for everybody on the label. And it's further complicated by her being on Dreamville, which is J. Cole's label. And I checked earlier because sometimes you can be on an artist label, but that artist themselves' music doesn't come out on that label. Like sometimes, let's say it's Dreamville, J. Cole's records come out directly through Interscope, but then all the artists that J. Cole's signs, their music comes out through Dreamville by way of Interscope. And that can actually be a better situation sometimes, because then you're getting more of the attention of the staff. The problem when the actual flagship artist music also comes out through that label is that artist's music is who's keeping the lights on. So that's always going to be the priority. And you got to think about it this way too. There's 12 months in a year. It takes a good 3 months to align all the machinery to put an album out. And a successful mainstream release, they're going to be looking for a good 3 months of support after the release to make sure that it's still being played and it's still charting and all of that stuff. In a 12-month year, there's no label that's going to really put their resources behind more than 3 or 4 projects. It's just the math of it, because you have the same staff working on all these projects. The same staff is having to convince all these vendors, all the distribution people. They have to convince Apple Music and Spotify. They have to convince the public relations people, no, that this is the one. This is the album. This is the one. Like, pay attention to this one. Put this one on the front page. You can't do that with every project. So if you're in a situation where you're signed to J. Cole's label, J. Cole's a flagship artist, if he's ready to drop, that's a good 6 months of the staff's efforts that's going to be carved out around putting their full energy into that one project. Now, it's Dreamville. You got JID. You got Ari Lennox. I'm not sure who else is on the label. But you can, as an artist in that position, be working really hard, all of your attention, all of your talent, all of your craft, all of your resources into this project. And you're like, fuck, you're excited. It's ready. And you can be in a situation where, like, you're trying to talk to the label about when it can come out. And they could literally turn around to you and say, oh, our 2025 is full already. It's only 12 months in a year. There's only so many big projects they're going to actually devote staff to. And On top of that, from November to January, the whole industry shut down. So them 3 months don't even count. You got 9 months. You got 9 months. You got a flagship artist, and you have these other artists. And as a label, you want these other artists putting their full energy and love and attention into this work. When the reality of it is you can't support them all. And it does get frustrating. And I've only experienced it on the independent level. I could only imagine. I just feel so much for her. Because I could only imagine how much worse it feels when you do have so much more exposure to the masses, where there's so much more expectation and people are like, when you're going to drop, when you're going to drop, when you're going to drop. And your honest, true to life answer is that you don't know because of this pipeline. You can get your date pushed back. They can give you a date and then turn around and say, oh, this other thing came in. We got to prioritize that. So now your shit's pushed back. Like, you can be in a situation where you've made a project, put your whole ass heart into it. It could be for right now. You could feel like this is the sound for right now. And be faced with a situation where it's realistically not going to come out for a fucking year. And then when it drops, you got to act like you just made it yesterday. It's just a bunch of bullshit, and it's really difficult. You can be in situations where I don't know what the A&R structure is like at Dreamville. I don't know if they have active A&Rs. I know a lot of that part of the industry has largely disappeared. But you can be in situations where you're not even getting feedback. You could be in the studio making songs, bringing them to the label and not hearing anything. Or you can hear something where it's like, oh, this is great. When you really like need feedback, like that's one of the big voids now in this creative pipeline, because the A&R situation is so different now. You're not necessarily getting input. You're not receiving any sort of guidance or criticism or feedback about what you're doing. And it could be very fucking isolating. You can get your budget cut. Oh, man, I remember one time I was in a car. I was on a tour. I was in a car with a headliner. I was driving. And the headliner was in the passenger seat. And the headliner got a phone call. And we were, it was a bunch of us in the van. We were all having a good time, hooting and hollering and laughing. But you could tell this was a heavy phone call. Right after the call ended, dude legit freaked out. Like, he started slapping the dashboard. He was hollering and shit. And, like, he didn't say why at first. But then when he calmed down, he explained that the label just, like, cut his budget in half, like, while he was working on a project. And I wasn't in a position in business-wise to understand how serious it was. But I do get that now. I completely fucking get that now. Because resources is so much the name of the game when it comes to this shit. When it comes to being able to make press assets, being able to make music videos, being able to hire PR for longer. Like, you can get the 1 month look, which is like we're gonna make the most we can out of these fucking 30 days. You can get a 3 month look, which is better. You can get a 6 month look, which, like, you really feel like your shit has some impact. Because then when you load a 6 month PR campaign with a bunch of assets, then it feels like your shit is still relevant. But the label, at any point, they can look at the numbers and decide we don't want to invest what we even said we were going to invest, what we told you to prepare for. We can now tell you it's not going to be that, and you can't do shit about it. There's just so much shit you don't know until you're in the situation. And that's what I really felt when I listened to Ari Lennox's rant. When she signed to Dreamville and Interscope, she had no idea she was going to be sitting at home on a Friday trying to figure out how to set up Google ads for her own single that the label was very much in support of artistically. She didn't know until she was in the situation that she was going to have to do that. And it just, that type of shit just doesn't fucking feel good. So much of modern success in the music business is based on the perception of success, a perception of winning. The money spent making you a famous person, making everyone aware of you. But it's all a really weird dice game when you're in the position and you're not the flagship artist. And she's been really transparent in the past about when this shit has fucked with her head. And today I think it just all came to a head. And she had to get that off. I mean, we'll see what happens. I'll be monitoring what happens because she has stated outright in this social media post that she wants off the label. And if they're smart, they'll let her off the label. But as we all know, corporations do not always do the smart thing. And I don't imagine Interscope especially much cares about their public perception. Dreamville probably does, especially because J. Cole's been taking a lot of L's this year. But we'll see. I just wanted to shout that out a little bit just as an artist, just really sending heart containers to her, because I, even on just the scale that I'm on, I've experienced some of that shit, and it just feels so terrible. It really fucking feels awful. And I hope that she ends up in a position to have a better relationship with releasing music, or as she even said in the rant, maybe she wants to step away from it altogether. I hope she's given the freedom to do that. And I really hope at some point, and I don't know if this is ever possible, because again, this is about trying to sell art. I hope that at some point it becomes possible to do this on a living at that scale, and for it not to fuck with your head and heart as much as it seems to now. Like and subscribe, homie, friend. It's free. Stop playing.